Welcome to What's Your Sign? I'm Julia Loken.
I'm Stevie Goldstein.
And I'm the lens flare of this podcast.
Oh,
Beautiful.
stunning, gorgeous.
Obsessed.
The moment. She is the sun. She is the flare. She is life. You guys, we're back to our first topic revisit. Dare I say, as first for us?
I think
so.
we did
I
the
think
houses twice, and I think we did.
Right. Well, we
we've
individualized
kind
the
of,
houses.
yeah, I think we may have done the elements a couple of times or things like
Mhm.
that. But yeah, I think technically maybe the first time we're doing it in order again.
Yes. You guys asked, well, on our Patreon, again, if you're not on Patreon, what the hell are you doing? Patreon.com/what's your sign podcast. You can suggest episodes, and someone can't remember who. Sorry, I'll shout you out if you refresh my memory. But someone suggested we go through the planets again. And I think we're all like, oh, cute. Yeah, planets are kind of important in astrology. So good suggestion. And it was like probably the first stuff we talked about, which makes sense because it's probably the first thing. Well, I don't know. I guess it depends. Signs or planets comes first in terms of first things you might learn in astrology. But I'd say it's
I think
probably
planets,
yeah.
honestly. And I have a little piece that I should have had
A performance
annotated.
piece.
Yes, I have a
Yes.
piece that I've prepared. It's
Well,
ready.
I think with planets you learn them outside of astrology. So we're all already
Right.
familiar with them, and then when you dig into astrology, it's like you're kind of refreshing on the planets and then getting to signs and
Mhm.
stuff.
I hang on. Of course I was like, make this dramatic proclamation, and
This is part of the piece. This is part of the
yes, exactly. Exactly. But this is a whole thing about the planets. This is from Mythic Astrology, Archetypal Powers in the Horoscope by Ariel Gutman and Kenneth Johnson. And we've heard some variation on this theme before, but I really liked how this was described. And this is from the first chapter, The Planets, and that's how they divide the book as first planets and then signs. What they say, the relationship between the planets, the signs, and the 12 houses can be expressed through an extended metaphor. Let us examine a theatrical production. This particular production is your life, and you are the playwright, or more precisely, the divine spark within you is the playwright. The play will, of course, have a number of different scenes. Those scenes or sets, the furniture, props, and so on, are represented in our metaphor by the 12 houses of the horoscope. As the actors enter, speak their lines, and exit, they will, of course, wear different costumes, and the zodiacal signs, which the planets occupy, represent those costumes. But the actors themselves, the actors are the planets, and the speeches through which they relate to one another are the planetary aspects. So, when we're looking in the sky, when we're thinking about how we're first conceiving of astrology, it's not through the signs, it's through the planets themselves, it's through their movements. We don't have like I think the signs, not that the signs aren't important, but I think it helps us to go macro to micro and to go like, we're only looking at the movement of the planet as it relates to its position in the sky. That's the signs, and obviously it colors those things, but when we're thinking of transits and everything too, I think planets is the big one.
Wait, what was the book again?
Mythic Astrology, Archetypal Powers in the Horoscope.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like backing back to early days when we first started talking about it. And I think that's a good way to visualize it too, because I just had this actually the other night at Passover when I was, of course, like I'm an astrologer, and it's like everyone's like for real, and it's like yeah, and then this then starting to see it's so different because this is the same group I had Passover with back in like 2007 2018, and like then everybody now knew their big three and a lot more about their astrology from even then, and I was like, oh whoa, that's so trippy. But then it's something I kept hearing over and over again, which take a shot is yeah, I like astrology, but I get tripped up mainly the houses, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, like if I know I get it, sweetie, I hear you. And I think it's a good reminder of like planets are carrying out the action, aspects are the feeling of the action. I think even the sign, I guess, is also the flavor of the action. And then the house is just where the action is taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the aspect is more what type of interaction they're
What type of
having.
action is being taken? Yes. I was
Yeah,
gonna say
like
this could
if
be modified. This could sound
yeah,
smarter, but
like if what kind of conversation they're in together, or what kind
Mhm.
of are we at battle, are we at the are we at school, are we at this, are we helping each other, and those kind of things. And I think when we talk about aspects and stuff, I think we forget kind of, when we think about positive aspects, so like doing something to help each other is difficult. Like we think of those positive aspects as like, no, it's figuring out whose strengths is what and who takes lead and all of those things. So I think definitely those things for sure. I think where it gets a little trippy with planets is we're talking about the sun, and it's not a planet, and it also doesn't move. So but we move, and so the relationship changes of where we see it and where we see it engaging with the other planets, and that's what we're studying in astrology from the Earth's perspective. So I just do want to give that reminder,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want people to come on here and listen and be like, these girls think the sun moves or whatever. We do know that that's the way it works scientifically, but the way we're studying it is from our perspective here on Earth.
And there
Yes.
is astrological study that is heliocentric, that does take the Earth's position into account and does see the sun as the center, whereas we are studying a geocentric, which I think fits because, again, we're talking about what it looks like from us, from our perspective on Earth. And I don't know what it's like on the sun. I know what it's like here. And so
Well, I
from
think
our
that's a very fitting metaphor for sun signs too, is like talking about how it affects us and our identities and our things, the way we grow. Um and so I think it's a nice metaphor to compare, the sun kind of out doing its own thing, and I think we all kind of feel like that when we go out into the world too.
I mean, Smash Mouth makes it sound like it's pretty hot to be walking up on the sun.
hell yeah. I wish that song would start playing right now. We could just
Ba-dun-dun-dun-dun.
take a pause and rock out.
All right. This is the part where you play the royalty-free version of Walking on the Sun in your mind's eye.
No, play the full royal. If it's in your
Okay.
mind's eye, play the full version. Don't
Yeah.
rob yourself.
Don't play the polyphonic ringtone version. This is not sun sign related, but I just feel like I have to share because I just learned this back to Passover. I didn't realize it's always on the full moon. It always starts on the full moon, lunar holiday. I didn't know that. I felt very cool saying, and it's tonight's a full moon of all nights, and then was politely told by my mother-in-law, she's like, I'm not trying to say this to, it's always a full moon, just a fun. It's like a tell of something, like if you know, but most people in the group actually did not know that. And then Easter's always the first Sunday after the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know. Fun facts.
Well, it is another testament to how a lot of our modern traditions were based in
planetary
the
shit.
cycles that we are studying here on this podcast.
Mhm.
And I think, in my culture, we don't celebrate Easter this Sunday, but I will. But it there's other religions that use a different calendar.
Mhm.
So
Totally.
that's another, there's plenty of those things. I mean, we talk about it with Lunar New Year and all of those things.
100%. Yeah, there was something to, I mean, I went back to the OG of cafe astrology. Sometimes heroes never die, but I think something that comes up a lot with sun signs, especially since more people do know their big three or more of their chart, or they might relate to other parts of their chart. I do think the sun sign has gotten a little bit, it's not underrated, but I feel like it does get like a little glossed over a lot of the time, even though it is our vitality and it is our life force. And it's at the end of the day, if you can only know one thing, knowing your sun sign is probably the most important, I would say. But I think something that they touched on, where was it? Oh, this is it. This is what I want to read from Cafe Astrology, the OGs, those who raised us. But The sun is so important in the chart that the happiest people on this earth are those who identify without over-identifying with the sun's expression. Though one might think that the traits of their sun would come easily to them, the truth is the sun shows us what we are learning to be. It is very important to remember that the sun represents a reason as opposed to instinct. And I think that was like a good reminder, because I feel like because astrology has so much nuance and layers and other planets and aspects, and so much is happening in your chart. I just had it last night where I met a Sagittarius and Aquarius who I've never met before. And they're just like, I'm so not my sign. I'm like, I wish I had this handy. I'm like, we're learning. Like, this is kind of just a never ending saga of becoming more Aquarian or becoming more Sagittarian or whatever it might be. So I think since it does often get wrapped up in like, so this is who you are and that's it. Like, I don't think it is as easy as that. And I like how they phrased it, of this kind of journey that we're having with the sun.
Well, Lisa said the phrase grow, and that triggered that to me, where it was like, oh yes, of course, the sun makes everything grow, including us, and we are growing into those capabilities or capacities, or it's the thing that we are growing towards or that inspires us. I'm sorry, Lisa, I cut you off.
That's okay. That's one of my personal themes for my notes for this episode is growth. But one of the things that I found that I really like is from the Complete Idiot's Guide to Astrology. It's top 5 reasons you should know your sun sign.
Ooh.
You're going to love them. Number 5.
To get laid.
Reveal whether the love of your life is a perfect match or a stupendous dud. Number 4, always have something to talk about at parties. Number 3, make excuses for your inexcusable behavior. Number 2, have the best pickup line ever. And number 1, have the best tattoo ideas.
Oh my God.
So I do think that was the funny little thing that the authors included about the sun signs, some fun ideas. I do think while they're silly, I do think there is some meat there. Like, I do feel like if you get a moon or rising tattoo, like you might want to like include a moon or you know what I mean? Like, if you get a sun sign tattoo, it's pretty obvious which sign in America, and here, studying the type of astrology we study. So I think that is funny. I do think it's something people bring up at parties first, and a pickup line and all those kind of things. And of course, your excuse for the way you are.
Love.
It's perfect. I was not expecting such a like Letterman style reveal of the top 5 reasons, but then I remembered, oh right, it's the
idiot.
Yeah. So good. Also, first ever tattoo for me was my sun sign symbol. So right on the money there. Also been greatly enjoying whenever you watch dating shows, reality shows, and then you see the like neck tattoo that's like, oh, that bitch is a Capricorn. I can't believe that she's having this breakdown. Yes, I'm talking about Jackie from this current season of Love is Blind. It was also on her back, but there's been other sun sign tattoos.
Like behind the ear, Scorpio.
They're always, they're usually like in little tucked away places. Mine's on my hip bone in a very, which I remember the tattooer saying like, this might not age well, this spot. And I'm like, she was right. It has not.
Hey, you live and you learn.
Look, my hip bones were quite different at 17 when I was getting the tattoo.
The one that I see the most frequently is Aquarius.
Of the tattoos.
Where I'm like, oh, okay, clocked you.
Well, that one also doesn't look like it. And I do feel like sometimes people a lot of the other ones look like it's an astrology tattoo. Yeah, that one could be something else.
But this made me think of the 2 signs that most identify, or at least in your experience just recently, Stevie, of 2 people saying, I'm so not my sun sign. And I think that this speaks to the larger kind of sun sign conversation, which I think sun signs get dismissed because they are the ones that kind of broadly group you with other people of your sun sign, as opposed to knowing your sun sign, your degree, how it interacts with the rest of your chart, and what that means for you. Not to say that there isn't, again, I defy anyone who's like, I can't be categorized in some kind of way. I'm always like, are you meeting such indescribable people all the time that couldn't possibly be broadly distinguished into groups? Oh, really? I would love to meet your friend list of these iconoclasts that can't possibly be contained. But I do think that is where Yes, yes, but I do think that is where people kind of rail against the sun sign because they go like, well, I can't possibly have this much in common with all of these people. And I don't think that that's what we are saying, but I think that
Mm,
that is like, I
I
mean,
I think, and Stevie made a really funny video about this where you find you find out your enemy's birthday and you figure out they're your same sign, and that happens. We've all felt that.
This just
Um,
happened to me with another Taurus, by the way. I was like,
of
this girl's
course.
such a bitch and she's
And
hot. Oh,
so,
okay.
dare I say, back to my theme for this episode, it takes growth to
mhm,
realize that you are like someone else that maybe you
yes.
don't necessarily like. It takes a lot of growth, and that is it. Also, it allows you, I think, in a lot of ways. There are a lot of Taurus comedians, and in a lot of ways, when I watch them on stage, because I study astrology, it allows me to go like, I can do that. I could do that. I should do that. Or like, just using a different technique or singing or doing something a little bit unusual that I could use as a tool in my toolbox. I'm not saying do what they do on stage by any means in a mimicry kind of way. I just think like that is how you learn, is by being able to say, okay, this person's like me. Maybe I don't love everything about them. Maybe they irritated me when I first met them, but growth is saying, okay, well, I do like their shoes. So maybe I should try something like that or whatever. And I think that that's what we're striving for in sun
Mhm.
signs.
Well, and I think
Huge
also
step towards the
it
shoes, by the way. I love it.
I think also like expression is something different because Steve was asking me when I told him what our episode topic was, kind of like my general thoughts about sun signs, and I kind of was not sidestepping, but I think my relationship to sun signs has changed a lot, knowing that I have an unaspected sun, and so it's very personal. But to me, I've gone like, oh, I went from being, when I first was drawn to astrology and all my life growing up, I was like, I am a Sagittarius and that resonates and I get that. And yes, that is who I am. But then if I kind of like look at my life, I don't relate as hard now because I know all of these other things and I know how I communicate and how I assert myself and these sorts of things and whatnot. But I think regardless of actual expression and how that looks, it's still, we're talking about your motivation and your like will and the thing that you are growing and aspiring to, and also just kind of like the quality of life force. And I don't think that that also, while it might not look the same in everyone, and I think that people, again, like you said, would go like, oh, I don't want to be like that person, but if we can go, oh, but we do kind of like, I don't know, burn the same or whatever that is. You don't have to like how they do it, but if but you can recognize those similar qualities. And I definitely feel that Sag wise.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. You hit on something, and I'm saying this for the first time, so I might disagree with myself as soon as I finish saying it. But it's like you don't have to even like your sun sign, but it feels like the secret sauce that's not that secret. It's like when people are
Hmm.
like, how do I tap into my destiny via astrology? Like, of course, we go to these we can go to these more like niche hidden spots of like the North Node or Chiron or releasing wounds, but also like, I don't know, maybe the thing that is truly shining its light upon you that is also, of course, yeah, like, we're two Tauruses here on the pod, but we're in different houses, we're in different aspects, we're all those sorts of things. I think it's like, I don't know, like when in doubt, look up stereotypes of your sun sign, and
Well,
maybe there's a secret, not so secret clue there of what might enhance your life, possibly. Okay, actually,
I
I do
like
agree
think
with what I just said.
yeah.
So
I
cool.
like thinking about that too as like anything that you're wanting to accomplish, because the sun is also our will, our goals, our it's related to, I found an interesting thing in this mythic astrology book too about the relationship between the sun, Mars, and Pluto through a particular myth, and we can talk about that in maybe or not, but just the idea of the ego and asserting yourself and what your like desire and will is, but also that life force, and also thinking about anything that we want to accomplish as like a literal plant. And you need to know where the light source is if you want that plant to grow. It doesn't mean that it can't also thrive in a room where there is whatever, but you should know where that is and what you need to do to kind of supplement, but you still are orienting to the light. We want to make sure that we're getting hit by that light too. And I think that that's the sun in our chart. At the end of the day, it still is like, you know, the light of our chart. And we can say that it's not there, but it is still I don't know. I know we've talked, the argument was made about the rising sign being kind of like when we come into physical existence. But I think that also still our sun sign is based on our like birthday, and is that broader thing. And that is still like our life force, our existence.
Nothing more body than the birthday, baby.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we measure time too. I mean, here, at least in the US, it's commonly a big celebration, and that feels very, sun, not to one everything, but Leo, like sun, heart, your close people, you're like, and we do the ritualistic part of lighting fire and extinguishing. And I think that those things are often depicted. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like if a candle goes out you're gonna die, but it's that life force and the darkness, and I think those are things that come up a lot around birthdays. I know for sure mine's coming up, so I always get feeling that a lot of the like gloomy and this and kind of just in my weird little dark cloud, and then usually the day comes and it feels like, oh, we've lit the light and then blown it out and nothing crashed and burned, And so I do think like your birthday is important. We make it important here. And I mean, people take off work for it sometimes. It's like, it's a fun day. So yeah, of course, then how it relates to you astrologically is going to be important too.
I don't know if it's a question, but a musing with y'all, because you mentioned it too. I can't remember who mentioned, but the sun is Leo's ruler, so thinking of like Leo properties. But then also I wanted to talk about the exaltations, detriment, and fall, because I was thinking about why, and I was gonna prep notes, and I was like, actually, let's just freewheel and talk this out, because I don't think we maybe talked about this before. But I'm curious our thoughts and feelings of like why detriment in Aquarius, why fall in Libra, why exalted in Aries, why the ruler of Leo. And if you're an Aquarius or Libra listening, like, it's okay. We all have detriments and falls or whatever. And I don't even put that much merit into those, but I do think it's good to know, because I think it is talking about like what would make the sun not as happy in these spots, or like what of those qualities. So I don't know. I'm just curious your thoughts on what the sun in its strength and in its maybe not so strong spots.
You mean it like metaphorically, right? Not technically.
Yeah, like metaphorically, like what about
Yes.
Aquarius qualities would be, which it's opposite of Leo, and that's why it is that,
Yes.
But
and then the same reason for
right,
Libra
but why
being...
symbolically, right?
I think symbolically, if I had to guess, I think Aquarius is a very thinky sign, and I think sometimes we think our way out of our bodies. We think our way out of, and that's very useful. That isn't a quality that you should hide away. Everything in astrology is useful, even the squares and the, we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but I do think we can think our way out of our will. We can think our way out of our identity in some ways. The way people like, I guess who people think you are is more rising, and then I think Aries it's quick fire. That's the sun. I don't know. I guess that's what first came up for me. Where is it in fall?
In Libra, which
in
I was
Libra.
surprised to read that.
Yeah, I mean, another air sign, so
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I get why technically they are,
yeah.
but in the metaphorical sense.
I think I agree to what you said, Lisa, about the brain component of Aquarius, the more intellectual, cerebral part, because that also is like you can be brain dead and be still considered technically alive, but if your heart isn't beating, you're dead.
And
like
maybe
that kind of that like
maybe that is with Libra too, like reasoning your way and doing, what I mean?
This is also, so this is from Mythic Astrology, and I liked this too, because I definitely like related to this, or thought, I was like, oh yes, this makes sense. So traditionally the sun is in fall in Libra, which is the symbolic sunset point in the astrological mandala. So if we are looking at, a natural chart where Aries is first house, Libra is 7th. We are like we're going below the horizon at that point. But here, the individual's will and purpose is submerged by the desire to compromise or harmonize with others. Though the sun in Libra is typically considered weak, sun, its symbolism, points out one thing which the powerful solar ego isn't very good at, which is relating. The myth of Apollo, he never married. He fell in love with the nymph Daphne, but she rejected him and ran away and was turned into a tree because of his wrath. But he is someone, strong solar people are typically considered self-absorbed and self-obsessed, and it is your personal will, not the will of the collective. And I think that we see both of those in both Libra and Aquarius, this idea of collectivism, of
Others.
partnership, of others. And I think anytime we are thinking of our energy outside of ourselves, whether or not it's actually happening, and not to say again that it's weak or not that, but it isn't just your pure will to shine and assert yourself. The other, hang on, they had a thing
What
about
an
Aquarius
interesting
too.
concept that they present without saying, what about the type of self that doesn't think about themselves?
Yeah.
It's like such an it's such
Yeah.
a large
Oh,
undertaking.
the people pleasers,
Yeah.
if you
Astrology is,
will.
yeah.
Well, but even that, where it's like, not a waste, but it is, I think, a really hard way to feel like you are asserting yourself when it is outside of yourself that is necessary to see your will done, and how that can be such a drain on your own personal sense of fulfillment and power and efficacy. Another thing that they said is, you know, Uranus, now the modern ruler, is the sign that would be opposite to Leo, and that in having an idea of democratic freedom, we do lose some sense of like singular purpose, and that being a very solar idea of it being like one. Leo, the sign of royalty, thinking of like a king, and this idea versus democracy of one person's will, and we are all kind of subject to that and following that. And while that isn't necessarily how we want to live our lives, it is clarity, and how kind of adding a democratic everyone for themselves thing means that now we have a bunch of wills, and how that kind of creates this chaos that is not as solar. And thinking again of like, focused light, focused attention, and that being a very solar. I hadn't thought of it this way, but one of the points that they really make of this, of being kind of, solar property being conscious, purpose, focused energy, not, and that being the kind of highest level of solar. Not always, because it can also be completely uncontrolled, unbridled ego. It's life force itself, and if that isn't checked, then that is also not, that the sun also scorches and burns. And that's what they were talking about, the relationship between Mars and Pluto is kind of that like high noon, nothing can survive in this barren space, which is like unfettered sun. And how there's a myth of Nagral, who's the god of noonday in Babylonian myth, and he storms into the underworld and overpowers the underworld goddess there and sets him up as the lord of the dead to rule alongside this dark goddess. And this is that that relationship between Sun, Mars, Pluto, of like complete power, force, and overtaking something, transforming it into something kind of unlivable in that way, which I thought was an interesting way to think about like the planets working together. But yeah,
I love
think
that.
it's interesting too. I just finished reading A Wrinkle in Time for the first time.
Oh,
Ooh.
wow.
I know it's a kid's book. I found it at my yoga library and I had never read it, and I was like, oh, I should check this out. And I think I'm sure most of you have read it. I don't know how I
It's
skipped it, but
definitely like 5th grade,
yeah,
maybe
it's for
required
sure.
reading, but like
It's for
every school's
sure.
different.
Yeah. It's for sure a kid's book. Somehow skipped me, but
Also was made a movie that flopped hard as
yeah, it
fuck.
didn't
for
do
sure.
well. But now I kind of want to see it now that I've read it. Anyway, there is some exploration of different, realms or planets, and what things feel like on each planet is different to as they, as the book progresses. And I do think it's interesting, we have the sun as such a like meter for our day. It's interesting that our solar system works this way, or I guess that our calendars and clocks do, that we've adapted to. Um, that, it is like the right amount of sleep for nighttime or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think, like, each day we get to see this complete evolution of light and darkness. Each day we get to, there's a plant I have outside that I'm trying to bring back to life, and it's in a spot. But every day I'm like, I got to remember at 3 o'clock to move it over there because there's more light over there, and then move it back. And it is just this kind of interesting metronome for the entire day. I mean, you can tell the time of day by the sun. You can, I'm given if it's in the sky, obviously you can't do that at night. But yeah, I think it's an interesting metric for our lives here. And so I think if we're, prescribing that to something within ourselves, or psychological astrological armchairing as we do, I think that that's something we can do within ourselves too, is like, when
Mhm.
we are checking the clock, is that a time to like check in with our identity and our purpose and what we're moving forward with for the rest of the day? And maybe that helps us, release some stuff. Today I went to a yoga class and I was in a terrible grouchy mood on my way. I don't know why. I had a nice morning, but I was just in a bad mood. And then I did the class. I said, I'm only going to think about things in this room today. Like, and then after the class, I was like, oh, my friend's here. And I just felt so much lighter. And so I think the more that we can check in with ourselves, with our identities, with what we want to focus on, and move forward with those things, the more I think we can embody our sun signs, the more we can grow into those things that feel like, oh, I'm not my sun sign. I'm not really like that. Well, like, check in with yourself every day. Make sure you're doing the things you want to be doing. And then maybe someday you find out, I guess I kind of am like that.
Mm.
Maybe you
Mhm.
don't, but maybe you
Well,
do.
and I think, and I love that. And I think a good reminder too that kept coming up, which I sort of forgot about in thinking about sun signs, is the over identifying as well,
Mhm.
as that over ego thing, which I'm been guilty of growing up as a staunch Taurus conjunct Venus. Like, of course, like I'm like, like if I had found out like, oh, we got your birthday totally wrong, I'd be devastated, crushed. But like, again, this is sun sign ego sort of thing. So there's a healthy balance of, you know, confidence versus being cocky, and then
Mhm.
self-deprecating versus being realistic and empathetic and like grounded in those things. So, it's hard to be neutral, and it's hard to be like self-reliant and all of those things. And um yeah, I know, like for me, like a big sun sign journey growing up too, is with it being in the 11th house with Venus, is like thinking about Aquarian stuff now to one that, but it was like, oh, wanting to really bring everyone into my world and also be into theirs, and like doing what my friends want to do, or like putting maybe an overemphasis on like doing things with other people. So like I think the fun thing, and a thing I like to remind people when looking at charts, is like, this is you as a baby just born. This is you now, and this is you hopefully at like 99 years old, if you want to be that old. Like, as whatever you feel about aging. So it's all going to unfold throughout time.
Well,
And
I
Mhm.
sorry,
think
that would just make me think of
Mhm.
another thing we can get to after. I'll come back to it, but also about cusp, which we'll come back to. But Lisa, what were you going to say?
even longer than 99. I mean,
Yeah, maybe.
we see those transits happening to people who've passed away,
Oh
to
yeah.
like, we see this is your entity. This is your, and
Mhm.
also, of
Whoa.
course, there's everyone has different spiritual beliefs and in reincarnation and all of those things, but this is your impact. This is your natal chart, is the way you in this lifetime engage with the astrology of the world of this lifetime. And so
Mhm.
maybe
Whoa.
your presence still changes. I mean, we see movies re-released, documentaries re-released, things happening on fourth and fifth Saturn returns of things, of concepts, ideas, films, actors, actresses. I mean, people that make that impact. We get to
Whoa.
see that. With people that don't, we don't necessarily get to study it as much, because we don't know who they were or what impact they had. But I guarantee, if you study relatives that have passed and things that have come up, very possibly that legal battle over their thing is aspecting another thing in their natal chart. So it's not just for your lifetime. This is your chart for potentially all of time.
Lisa, that was
Mhm.
the most like, I need to go lay down. Like, that was the most profound, like, like, I want to reach through the screen and hold you. I'm like, yes, this is like, you're so right. Like, your natal chart is your impact. That's going on a t-shirt. That's going on a bumper sticker. It's true, because we do see that, especially, I think we can, like what you said, we can see that legacy through, if you left behind material for us to continue to follow, like art or music
Well,
or ideas or books or what have you. But like, damn, that's so true. I love that. That's sick.
well, and when people are talking about those kinds of things, they always will talk about someone who like embodied the spirit of something. And it's not,
Mhm.
of course, we're talking about the literal work that they did or something like that, but we're also talking about these kind of broad stroke sun sign things of like the spirit of rebellion, the spirit of, community, the spirit of helping someone, whatever. I'm giving very bad examples, I feel like, but I feel like that is like a phrase that is used in those kinds of things. And that to me is very sun sign too, where we are talking again about energies that can't necessarily be contained in something literal. We're talking about like life force. On the temple of Apollo, there's two phrases inscribed at the gates, and they are know thyself and nothing in excess. And I think that like between those two things is like the gateway to the sun. And I think both of those are what we've talked about, that like, what do you really want, and also not kind of that over identification part too. um Something that
Totally.
I thought was really interesting, and I wouldn't have thought about this that way, but in this mythic astrology book they talk about how the god Apollo wasn't originally a sun god, but is in classical time. And so in classical time, the god Apollo rules science, mathematics, archery, but also oracles, prophecy, and music. So this god of music and medicine is like reconciling these two opposite things that are both very much of this world and also kind of subconscious and underworld, and how that is like the sun. And so nothing in excess too of that, like finding that balance between identifying with like literal things that are your job, the things that you do, and also this other kind of like life force spirit thing that can't be contained.
I love that. Just a quick stat too, like how we get your sun sign is like the other, I know we're going to say planets, but with the sun and moon luminaries, they are also moving through a season. There's 0 to 30 degrees of each sign, and it takes about, go figure, a month to move through. That's why we know this as these birthday month seasons, but it's not as a clear start as, if you're already here, you probably know this, but it's not like, oh, May 1st is Taurus season. They're staggered usually at the half months, but I think this brings me to cusp, because I think this still comes up a lot, is like, oh, I'm like a Virgo Leo, or like I'm a this, and it's like very close, yes, but also once that's when you got to check your natal. That's when you're going to need the time, because it signs do have to change over at some point. So it just depends on which side of the changeover you're on. And like, if explaining this in super dummy terms, and not that we're dummies, but maybe we
Well,
are. Well, jury's
Depends
jury's
on who you
out.
ask.
Yeah.
also those inner planets, Mercury and Venus, tend not to stray too far, because
Mhm.
all of the solar system is revolving around the sun. um those planets cannot physically move as far, especially from our perspective here on Earth. So you are likely to have influence from one of the other planets, which we can talk about in other episodes. So maybe you are a Leo Virgo cusp and your sun lies at the end of Leo, but maybe you have Mercury, Venus there. Mercury, if you were born in
Mhm.
the beginning of the day, you might also have it rising over there. So it does depend, because I know some people that just know their sun sign and cusp. They really, really feel identified with both. And that's okay. There's a place in your natal chart for that too. If there's nothing there, I mean, I feel identified with Aries energy. I'm a like 1 degree sun, And I feel identified with Aries energy, but I have nothing there. But in my life, I found a lot of Aries friends. It's my first house. I also have my husband who's an Aries. So there are things in your life that will come that will fit into those things. Even if I'm saying like you technically can't be both signs, you also kind of technically could be like a little bit of
Well,
each.
I think especially if we're talking about the sun sign as being like our identity and our will and all of those, to me, the biggest thing about cusps is knowing that you could have been something else and how that then impacts your sense of self and your idea of maybe I would have been more effective as this. Maybe I would have, maybe I could, what could I have been this way? It's like the sorting hat in Harry Potter, knowing when the sorting hat says you would have done well in Slytherin. Of
Well,
course, now Harry Potter isn't in both houses, but he knows maybe I would have done better there. Maybe I belong there. Is that really who I am, or is it this thing that I feel? And I think just having the notion of another thing to know about
Another
yourself that maybe
lifetime.
isn't yourself
well,
is
I have that because I was supposed to be born. I'm a C-section baby, so I really was supposed to be born on a different day, and it was supposed to be born in Aries season. It didn't work out, but I am next weekend getting a reading with an astrologer who asked about that in the reading form. So I will report back. I don't know yet why. If there's any other little insights based on
Whoa.
that.
Well, and I think we might have talked about this back in the sun sign episode because I was due as an Aries too, but I was 2 weeks late. So
Well, it's different when
God said,
surgery
nah.
was scheduled, you know?
Right. Like you
Yeah,
really
I
were
was
supposed to be an
supposed
Aries.
to. But
I was
also
like
like
guesstimated to be an Aries, but like that changes
also
all the
like
time.
it's also the same thing where it's like, well, you weren't ready. Like that's basically what it boils down to, yeah.
It would have been too demonic if that worked out. I think I shared this TikTok. I don't know if you two saw this, but about the like being born in the wrong generation. Did you see that one about the old ass dad?
Mm-mm.
I can read like the screenshot and I'll share it, but it was just like someone's close up of a face saying like, I was born in the wrong generation. No, really. My grandpa was born in 1888 and had my dad when he was in his 70s. And my dad had me when he was in his 50s. By all means, I should have been born in the 1960s, but they both waited a long ass time to have a kid. And it's like, right. Like just that idea of, I think just back to custom, like what could have been, or I think of people who like, I ate my twin in the womb. Like, wouldn't that have been weird if I had this twin or like that butterfly effect sort of time thing? But alas, we are here as our sun signs and doing our thing. And yeah, I guess, but that is really trippy to think. It's like, oh, right, they could have been born in the 60s or something, which is true, I guess, for a lot of us, but or like much sooner or much later, like time.
Or
I got old parents.
Yeah, a thing that's not as common that then makes you be aware of how you are a thing that is outside of you, influences your identity, that can either help or hinder what you feel is your purpose. And I think that that is something too where you just go like, I don't know if I feel like this, but also that is part of the sun sign journey too, I think, is like knowing what is really you. Who are you as decided by you, not as decided by the circumstances, these things, because that's another thing they bring up in this mythic one is like the hero's journey is that kind of, just finding out who you are, not because you just know who you are and you identify with that thing, but because of how you show up in a situation or whatever, or what drives you forward. And I think that that is something too to remember, that like you know thyself, you get to decide that. Don't over identify with it, that it keeps you from growing and learning and kind of adjusting those things, but also it's you, and you are the one that like it's your life force to use and choose if you however you want.
I also a note for fixed signs because I feel like, and every sign's gonna have their own thing. It's just because I'm a fixed sign that I feel this way, but it's you are you no matter how much you change over the years. And every day, some days I wake up and I'm like, I have someone else's back today. I didn't know I had this back pain or whatever. So every version of you is still you. Like when you see a flower grow, you don't go like, oh, it's gross that it didn't just stay like that or whatever. You appreciate that it grows, that it blooms, that it dies, that it comes back or whatever. So don't get so stuck in that like, this is me, this is who I am, and I'm never changing my mind. And it's like, maybe you decide you like that person later in life. Like, who cares, you know?
Well, it's the fine balance of the sun ego. Like you said, over identifying or under identifying. It is the happiness is found in that sweet middle. I'm going to start being vintage and just start asking people just for their sun signs. I'm over. No more big three for me. I just want to know. I want to just know your sun. I'm going 70s throwback right now.
What's
I'm
your
also like,
sign?
what's your sun sign, darling? Anything? I wrote some
I know. I was
things for
like,
each sun sign.
let's read your
Anything?
I
things.
wrote some affirmations too
Oh,
for
perfect.
just in general, sun.
Okay. Did we want to go Aries or just for general or
Yeah, I'll do them first because it's just for all general kind of
Okay.
like if you're trying to dig into your identity, if you feel like you're at a loss of power, you don't know who you are today. These are things to bring you back into your sun.
I love that. Any other last things? I like this one other fact. It's never retrograde. Good point. That is true.
Yeah.
Never retrograde.
It's never retrograde. Just like the moon too.
Just
I
like
mean
the
the
moon.
luminaries.
I think
No,
that's
I mean,
I think that's it. I'm actually surprised rethinking about it how it is this middle. I don't know. I'm surprised how it's like balanced and all the parts, which makes sense. Anyways.
I find it interesting that I know we're trying not to like go super towards this, like with Leo and the heart. I find it super interesting that it's the center of our solar system. Having that represented when we didn't have that knowledge is very interesting to me.
I mean, my biggest fear is the sun going out, like in like the top existential like climate future fears is like the sun disappearing is like high on the worst case scenarios.
If you think about, well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And if you think about the sun being a reminder every day that like life is persisting, you know, that something that light is coming, that food can grow, that we are here, that warmth, you know, again, depending on to the degree, obviously is gonna change. But yeah, I mean,
it makes you happy. The sun is joy.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
affirm us.
Hit us, Lisa.
All right. There's a few. I am warmth and light. I know who I am and everything I do matters. I am a conduit to growth. I am important and I trust in my abilities. I have prepared to love myself deeply. I am driven by light and positivity. My heart is open to all the good things that life can offer me.
Lerv. Yes. Need that essential, gorgeous, perfect. I have one for each sun sign. And look, you might be like, this is obvious to these sun signs. And maybe we need to remember some obvious lessons about our sun sign. So with that, let's talk about Aries sun. And I wrote them all in I am learning sentences. Because I was just thinking back to Cafe Astrology's this. I am learning about your sun sign. I'm growing into this thing. So there's the framework for how these were crafted. But Aries sun, I'm learning to be proud of myself and to take the lead. I abandon fear. Taurus sun, I am learning to value myself and ask for what I need and share my voice loud and clear. Did not plan on those rhyming.
Rhyming,
Whoops.
cute.
Gemini sun, fear is clear. No.
What if it was all like iambic pentameter the rest of the way?
Wow.
Dude, that'd be awesome.
Also, the Gemini sun, this sort of goes now with, anyways, you'll see. But I'm learning to be kind to my mind and not settle for the easiest joke. Cancer sun, I'm learning to love myself and embrace the mutual love of others with no strings attached. Leo sun, I'm learning to be seen even when it's easy to hide. I deserve to feel special. Virgo sun, I am learning to be a citizen of Earth and worthy of happiness, and I don't need to earn it. Libra sun, I'm learning to find peace within myself as I release the need for approval from others. Scorpio sun, I am learning to be proud of all my parts of self, not just those I selectively share. Sagittarius sun, I'm learning to find my independence through bold swings, but also in the mundane. It always doesn't have to be interesting. Capricorn sun, I'm learning to not only be respected, but adored, and that my standards are in fact boundaries. While I might lead by example, it is not my job. Aquarius sun. I'm learning to be erratically earnest and to not think my way out of pleasure. Things can be just what they are. Which, when we were talking about Aquarius stuff, I was like, oh, that is kind of tapped into what I wrote for them. And Pisces sun. I forgot to do yours. No, I'm just kidding. I have something here for you. I am learning that I am a human being who needs to be nourished. I have both strengths and flaws, which connects me to society. And that's it.
Beautiful.
Mhm. Well, that's this. I mean,
Sun.
classic.
Good old
Icon.
suntan.
Sun's out, buns out.
We love
Show
the
your
sun.
show your damn ass, sons.
My dog is literally showing me his buns right now.
Oh my
Little
goodness.
cutie.
show the sun thyself. No, I think
Sun-
it's a good reminder in the, it's so fun to get into the weeds, but the sun's where it's at.
The start of it all, the center of it all, and how we figure out the other stuff too. So
Mm-hmm.
the sun is important.
Mm-hmm.
We
It makes
love
me
the
think we don't
sun.
talk about like the transiting sun a lot as well. I mean, I know we do, but I feel like you hear a lot
Well,
about like the other aspects, the other planets, and it's like the sun.
I think because like the moon, it's moving quickly,
Right.
and they are not lasting as long as the others. But when we're having big Sundays, what a difference a day makes. There's so many,
Mhm.
songs and poems and stories of all of these kinds of things too, where it's like a good day also can change it
Mhm.
all or
Yeah,
ruin it all.
I think with the sun transits too, I mean, we get those Kazimis and stuff, but I think you're right
Mhm.
because the sun isn't obscure. Like you can't see the other planet if the sun's like there. I mean,
Mhm.
it's still there, but like in the sky, it's like, oh, you can't see that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it does bring you into that and expands and grows those things too. So
Yep.
Totally.
Well,
Cool. Well, guys, we'll be revisiting all
yeah.
the planets and their signs. So I'm excited too. I mean, it hits so different, from when we're just early birdies. So
Yeah, thank you
sun
so
signs
much.
for life.
Thank you so much for the suggestion. Thank you for being a patron if you are one. Thank you for listening, and
Yes.
we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.